Previously, on the One-Eyed Film Podcast.
People consistently are saying, this is a great setup for season 2. I'm like, I don't care. I want season 1 to be good. And it was almost good. I am going to argue throughout this whole episode that you shouldn't be waiting for season 2. I believe seasons should stand on their own. Otherwise, don't release them. I understand what they were going for in that episode, but at the same time, I couldn't feel sympathy for the guy who would not learn from his mistakes. That was what I was like, you're really trying to get me to care for the guy who will not grow up and will not be an upstanding human being. You gotta admit, they didn't actually have any major crossovers, which helps and hurts. It hurts because it's not tying in. It helps because it's not tying in. Because I sent you the video of like, this is the same universe, by the way, and I think it showed
Thor Love and Thunder and
Thor Love and Thunder versus the episode 9 apartment fight. They're just very different tones, and I mean that's part of the joy of such a diverse universe, is that there's things that you can have comedy movies, you can have dark and gritty movies, you can have okay flops and hits and masterpieces and whatever. There's a bunch in between.
Are you watching closely?
There's a bunch in between, but I want to hear your rant on Muse, though.
rant on Muse. Well, I feel like first we have to do the rant on White Tiger.
Oh, okay,
we get
backing
to the
up.
rant on Muse.
That's fine.
Anyways, because I mean it's same problem with both of them.
Yeah, I thought that we were going to get a lot more of White Tiger, and that's probably the point. But 2 episodes, I know that they're going to develop his niece to be the new White Tiger. That's pretty obvious. But it's so shallow, and it could have been a cool character. But again, maybe he was picked because no one's like, oh, who's White Tiger? Oh, he's gone. Like, I mean, but we also never got to see his
Mystic Amulet.
Yeah, except for the little TV in episode 1, which again, he could have just been any punchy vigilante. And I'd never. He said, I didn't have my amulet, so obviously I couldn't defend myself or whatever. I'm like, what does your amulet do? You never explain it. And then he's dead. And obviously that is early on in the show, season 2, kick off other story beats of like. First off, I believe that there's kind of a theme between 3 and 4 of system does its job, but it's not enough because ultimately Hector was released and then killed. And then obviously episode 4's theme. But it does something to Matt to bring him back to Daredevil that I don't think was implied hard enough. It was implied that the failure of the system that he saw in those 2 situations caused him to somewhat revert back to his primal instincts of being Daredevil and not shoving it down for a year and a half like he did. But I don't think that was actually explored in his mentality. If it was the original show, he would have had a heart-to-heart with Father Lantom, or in this case, it would have been Maggie, maybe. Bring Maggie back, talk about his thoughts with his mom, things like that. Spoilers for season 3 of Daredevil. But there's not enough. We'll get back to Hector in a second. There's not enough thinking. There's a lot of doing. There's not a lot of thinking in this show. And there's just so much good thoughts in the original show. And they just didn't stop to breathe and do that. And also we even got a hint that he might return to the church because he had that. I don't even know what that moment was of him thinking and listening to the prayers and the singing in the church that one episode. But I was like, maybe. No, nothing. 0. He's just another generic superhero unless we come back to it in season 2. But I am basing my views on this season off of this season. I'm not going to pretend like it might happen in season 2 because I've been bitten by that before. So.
Well, they had him praying later on in the show.
Where?
See, there's a scene where Heather's like, oh, you still do that? You forgot about that
Really?
scene?
No, I forgot.
That was like in episode 7, I want to say.
Matt is reciting the Litany of St. Yves. So, okay, so he was doing some liturgy. Okay. I do remember that.
And he had the
But,
dialogue with Karen later about thinking that this is like God's purpose for his life and everything. So
Matt Murdock recites the litany. Again, I'm butchering these titles. Litany of St. Yves in episode 6, a prayer to the patron saints of lawyers and the poor. I still think that was a light version of what we got compared to season 3, where he's just dealing with his identity.
Yeah, it was very much.
I'm just thinking about
down.
the quote from the season finale of season finale of season 3. With Tapestry quote, which is spot on and just so good. But there's nothing that's going to come close to that. He's basically a good Catholic Christian boy in that scene with Maggie. And unless they're going to do a massive arc where he's Daredevil just to get Daredevil content into some redemption at the end, I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like that's going to exist. I just know that it's not in season 1.
Back to White Tiger. It's the same problem I feel like it was with Muse and a few other things. It feels like the show was just kind of like a sample platter of a lot of different thoughts and ideas instead of like fully committing to anything.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's really been the problem with a lot of MCU shows, that they don't really like commit to what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like I think especially like Moon Knight could have really been something interesting if they really like dove into the mental psychotic side of things, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But then by like episode 3, it's just more or less a normal superhero show.
Mm-hmm. Have you rewatched Moon Knight? I'm curious.
I should.
Okay. I don't know. It's just sometimes the shows are telling by how much you rewatch it.
Yeah.
Like Daredevil original.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. White Tiger and Muse underutilized. Even though it's not the same, this show still falls flat on what the conflict is supposed to be about. In previous shows, it's been the surprise villain. Hawkeye at the end just was like, oh, guess what? Fisk is back for the last 2 episodes. Not even the last 2 episodes. I think he was his face was shown in the 8th episode or whatever, and then he was actually in there for the 9th or whatever, the last one. It wasn't intentional for this one because they had these mini stories, basically. 2 and 3 went together. 6 and 7 went together. And so, yeah, the story didn't kick into gear until the end. And I think Mr. Patterson, I forget his name, who cut Ahsoka and Kenobi and Boba Fett into shorter movies instead of a show, could do that with Born Again. Because it just seems like they got distracted. And I know that they didn't, because they had a different idea for what the show would look like. And this overhaul just wasn't it. Would you say that the overhaul was good enough? Because we would obviously have the overhaul over what we would have gotten if there wasn't one.
Yeah.
But was there enough overhaul that it's good enough? Like our episode title, Almost So Good.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Again, I feel like there's a whole rule, kind of going back for a little bit, of show and don't tell. With White Tiger, they told us he was this vigilante and everything, but we didn't see much. I feel like for both him and Muse, we needed like 2 more episodes for each of them before episode 3 for White Tiger and episode 7 for Muse. Like seeing White Tiger be that vigilante would have made fans happy, and would have made everything a bit more impactful. And especially with Muse, I mean, as I told you after the episode, it would be we would have forgotten who that guy in the first episode was if we weren't told that, or if we didn't hear that he was gonna be Muse. So
Yeah.
He should have been a recurring character as Bastion instead of just not being in the show until Muse. Like seeing therapy sessions with him and Heather, like I feel like if we just would have had like one scene per episode until episode 7 or whatever, and seeing her like start to see signs that he's kind of messed up, but I mean kind of choosing to ignore them because she doesn't want to believe it,
Yeah.
would have made like episode 7 hit a lot harder than just hearing him talk about his infatuation with her and everything.
Yep.
So
the funny part about doing it in TV show format is that they do last time on Daredevil Born Again.
Mm-hmm.
And those are actually important to watch because you forget things. This show is not like the Netflix show, because what I would do when we maybe went multiple days without watching that, we could still think back. What was the last thing we watched? Oh yeah, we left them. They were standing over a pit, looking down into an endless pit, which was actually, now that I think about it, a really cool scene because Matt throws the light or throws something, and you just hear nothing, even through the credits. Like it doesn't even clink in the credits. It just keeps going. That's an amazing scene. But you think back to just the last thing you saw. And that you can't do that with this one. You have to be reminded, oh yeah, this happened 3 episodes ago. This one happened 6 episodes ago. And it's very annoying. You can't use that as a crutch. It really pissed me off.
And the thing is, I don't think any of that can really be blamed on the overhaul. I think that's what the original version was just going to be.
Yeah.
It's just like, why was this greenlit from the start? And why did we? Yeah. How did they get that far and before realizing it sucks? To go back to your question, is it? I don't know. Is it good enough? I mean, like you were saying, it's like, would I rewatch it? Maybe.
I actually think there's an argument to be made for keeping all the content here and doing what you said, expounding maybe with another episode or 2. Put an episode between 3 and 4, put an episode between 5 and 6, or replace 5, honestly, with another Muse episode. Like you can have sub arcs in a story, but make them meaningful, and they just weren't. Imagine like one inserted after episode 3, and instead of ending episode 3 with Hector being murdered, having a little bit of Daredevil, White Tiger fighting together, and then there's a trap set up by the police with freed criminals who were unjustly or behind closed doors, shuffled some papers, and they got out, and the police hired them with some like, oh, you get bail or whatever, to attack the vigilantes. You know, this is maybe the start of the anti-vigilante task force, but they don't want dirt on their hands, so they do it with criminals. But then suddenly the one cop, he still can step out and murder Hector, and then Daredevil escapes and has to leave Hector's body behind. But there you get more action, you get kind of a plot instead of just what we got at the end of episode 3 where Hector runs around, turns a corner, and gets shot. It's very frustrating. And I think that something like that could have worked. More episodes, same content, could have worked.
It either needed more episodes or less episodes. Because as I said too, I mean, you pretty much just need like 1, 8, and 9, and that's a full story right there. Because those were all the strictly post overhaul episodes, and
Let's talk about the real story plus the integration with how this is technically now officially season 4 of Daredevil. Mm-hmm. Though I'm going to keep calling it Born Again season 1 for clarity. It was originally not going to be. Again, I'd be so annoyed if we got the original version because there's similar actors. I wouldn't have minded. English is weird. If Karen and Foggy were omitted, but the fact that they would have recast Vanessa is worse. And just the idea of keeping Vincent D'Onofrio and Matt Murdock. Again, I've argued this before. This is where our conflict for nostalgia came in. If they're going to half reboot it, don't. That's worse. And pick somebody new. Go with your bad story idea for Daredevil, but don't bring Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio in. So, yes, I'm glad that they brought Karen and Foggy back. But, again, only for a short amount of time. Obviously, Foggy died. We can do our faces like, oh my gosh, he might come back because of that one comic run. I do think that Ellie denies it, but I don't want it to be true. I don't want it to be true. I also feel her sentiment.
Really, you'd rather he would stay dead?
I don't want him to come back. I want him to be that ploy of mourning for Matt and kind of that feeling that we got a glimpse of in episode 4 with Frank. But they're going to bring him back because of that one comic run and because he's such a beloved character. And somehow, some way, that scene is going to be... okay. I ranted about it in our sub-episodes when we talked about our reviews for 1 through 3, blah, blah, blah. The meaning behind it that we discovered in 8 and 9 makes a little more sense to why Dex is out and why he shot up that bar. But also it doesn't. Because he could have just taken out Foggy, taken out his client, because that was the thing that was in Vanessa's way. But then he gets down off of his sniper position, walks into the bar and starts shooting them up. And maybe that was his craziness. You know, he's not really a sane person, but he's also not stupid. And then that doesn't justify the opening scene of the show, which again was definitely thrown together because we needed a oneer. We needed a fight scene before Daredevil doesn't put on the costume until episode 5 or 6, technically 6. So it just felt like key jingling all over again. And a very shoehorned way to be like, yeah, Dex is back. And yeah, we explained it, but it wasn't that great of an explanation. Vanessa's intentions were good and made sense. Like, she didn't want her illegal trade through the Freeport to be found out. And Foggy was onto her in an unknown way. I get that. But it just seemed like they needed shock value for the first episode. Mm-hmm. And also, why did Karen have to be in San Diego or wherever she was, San Francisco? They really sidelined her. And the only part she played in episode 9 was calling Frank to say, Matt needs you, which that worked, but then she's gone. And we could have had that interaction the whole season. He could have still been pushing her away, but she could have had her own storyline. Give us another Karen episode where she has kind of her you get her perspective of this whole situation, and she's ranting to her girlfriends that she's made. You know, she's trying to build community because of her trauma that she's experienced with losing Foggy and all of this stuff that we saw in the original show. And then she's just like, yeah, going through it. Maybe she even meets Heather. Maybe she becomes Heather's. I mean, everyone's Heather's client, honestly. And just processes some of this stuff before just showing up. Because also, I don't think it's explained why she shows up in episode 9. Besides,
well, they say Kirsten called her, didn't? Or I forgot what.
Yeah, right. No, just kidding. I don't know. it just seems like they're doing what I'm doing now, is writing up a tie between something to explain it away. And yet my explanation isn't good enough for a Disney level TV show, and they still went with it. They went with those connections. So, golly.
Again, most of that's because of the whole pre-post overhaul mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
And really the purpose of the first episode was to explain why Foggy and Karen weren't in the rest of
Exactly.
it. So
I think I said that to you when it first released. And I was like, this can't be it. This can't be why they didn't kill Foggy and have Karen move out of state, across country, honestly, just to have them out of the way. And they did. They did do that. And it makes me so mad because I understand delays are going to happen, but I think they should be more accepted. I understand that studios need to make money. But if they had scrapped 2 through 7 of the original plot and story and started fresh, even keeping 1 through 8, but building different storylines, it would have been great. But they had to get something out soon. Yeah. They had to get it out fast. And we weren't going to wait another 2 years. We could have. Like, I forget about the things that I'm waiting on to come out, like, right now. They come around, and then I'm happy. I'm not actually waiting for Dune Messiah because I forget that Dune, like, I don't have a date in mind. Like, maybe I'm a little frustrated at things like Beyond the Spider-Verse. What?
And the Batman?
Oh, Batman Part 2? But I'm not thinking about that on a daily basis. Some people are, maybe. But
it annoys me quite a bit.
I'd rather have quality over speed. I don't want it now. I want it good. How's that for a shirt? I don't want it now. I want it good.
You should tell Disney that.
What do you think about Matt's Army?
Matt's Army. Man.
The end of season 2. Or sorry, the end of season 1.
We should talk more about those last 2 episodes.
Okay.
Because they were actually more or less good.
I still have my problems with them. We watched the finale together.
Yeah.
And it finished and we were like, that's it? That's how they're ending it?
There was that part of it.
You said
it. It was still a good episode. If there was more to this season, that would have been a better episode. But as a finale, wasn't a big fan. True.
It does not feel like a finale. Mm-hmm. It feels like it's setting up season 2, which is a problem. Can't do that.
The last 2 felt most like the original show.
True. But I'm going to bring up a point that you told me last week when it aired.
I was going to bring...
Violence and swearing are cranked to an 11. And that is not just... That's not a cheat code to get a good episode or a good Daredevil episode or whatever. I think the fighting was gratuitous. The swearing was gratuitous. And it ultimately felt like tokenism. Hey, look, here's this thing you like. And even the part where Matt's yelling at Frank to not do it. Yes, that's in character, but it's still being shown for the sake of the audience, the gore lovers. It made me very uncomfortable, but
well, I feel like that's still kind of just their relationship.
It's still Frank's type of fight, but it's also just everywhere. It's like Disney is like, oh, we're supposed to be dark and gritty now. Insert blood splatter every other frame. That's not how it works. So that was the only. Okay, there was more fighting than that. The other complaint I had was Matt saving Fisk, because I replayed that last 20 seconds of that episode over and over again to try and figure out what Matt was doing when he dove in front of Fisk. Because he was not going for Heather. Mm-hmm. His movement was truly to take a bullet for Fisk. And he had just been seething through his teeth to Heather about how Fisk cannot be trusted. And he was threatening Vanessa because he figured everything out. and then he hears the bolt in Dex's gun, and the believability is low for me, but I'm not gonna get hung up on that of like where he knew it was pointing.
That part's a little weird.
But I'm gonna let that go because his action is not get Heather down or get himself down or get anyone else or like throw something at Dex or whatever. It's get in front of Fisk, because if he dove, it means he understood a general idea of where the bullet was, and then it hits him. It seemed intentional, and we never explained what his intentions were.
Well, I think that goes back to, Dex's line earlier in the episode about a good man defending his worst enemy.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone through Matt's thoughts on if Fisk should live or not.
Yeah.
And obviously the entire conflict of season 3 was mute because he eventually got out and became mayor. So though the system did not work again, and I don't know. It's more confusing than it is satisfying.
Yeah.
And that's not what's supposed to happen for a TV show of this stature.
Yeah, going back to what we were saying earlier, I think there is a misunderstanding of mature storytelling in this series. As we were just saying, with the gratuitous violence and the swearing. I'm just finding what I said so I can say it in a similar way. I feel like the new directors of the show and the new writers don't understand why the original show was as good as it was. Because in the original series, there was one F-bomb.
Yeah.
One in the whole show. And in Born Again, there's gotta be like 50.
How many F-bombs?
I don't know if that's gonna be a number you're gonna be able to find, but
I don't know. I'm sure somebody's caught. For example, the first 2 episodes have about 6.
yeah, I was figuring about 6 in each. As we've already said, what we got is better than what we could have gotten, but still they don't understand what made it great. For one thing, what the violence really does, what the violence and gore in the original show really do, is they enhance the realism of the world. And even though we don't necessarily like to see all of that, even rewatching the original, there's still moments where I look away because it's a bit too gory or violent for me sometimes.
Yeah,
But
I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah. But particularly the scene in the finale where Kingpin crushes Gallows' head. It was just absurd and excessive, and had the opposite effect of what the violence did in the original.
Yeah.
Because whether or not someone could realistically do that, it still feels fantastical, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
For him to just tear a guy's face apart like that.
Yep.
So, because just showing us these violence and the blood splatter and having all these F-bombs, that's not what mature storytelling is.
Yep.
It's
like what a kid thinks mature storytelling is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're just showing us the right things and think we're going to be happy with that. It's almost like this, some of the same issues of what I had with his appearance in She-Hulk.
Yeah.
It's like they think they can use a hallway scene and his theme for a short bit, and you even use the same actor and like call it Daredevil. And yet that's what Born Again pretty much does at the same level.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, you can't just have these superficial things and call it Daredevil. You know, this meaningful and mature storytelling. It's about telling a deep and meaningful story that feels real.
Yeah.
It feels like heartbreaking. And that's what the original show did. Yeah. And I feel like there were hints of that in Born Again, but it didn't do that nearly as well as the original.
100% agree. It's back to what I heard on Open Bar Critical Drinker say. One of his friends said, and I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but is it giving the fans what they want or giving the fans something that looks like what they think they want?
Mm-hmm.
Or something along those lines. And it was more or less giving us or something that looked like what we wanted and had no heart, very little heart. So that's why it was almost so good. Mm-hmm. And unless you have anything pressing, we're going to end it there.
Were you going to bring up Ray Nadeem?
Oh, I think we should do another we should do another Daredevil episode just on the original series.
Okay.
Because there were a lot of things that we missed from our first episode that we could have done since then, but we didn't. So let's do it again. Yeah.
So stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned for that. Yeah, we have a lot to talk about with Nadeem. To be continued, just like episode 9 of Daredevil Born Again.
I didn't even like. You asked me about his army, and I circled back to a previous question. I understand what the directors were saying about it. Did you hear their comments about it?
No.
They said they didn't want it to seem too hopeful. Like they had a fighting
chance. How dare we have hope in the finale of a...
Well, that's like part... I mean, they wanted it to seem like... I don't know exactly how to say it. They wanted it to seem like they had little, but they still had the will to fight, I guess, is what they were trying to say about it, which makes sense. But at the same time, it's like, if this is meant to be a war on vigilantes, it's weird not to have any vigilantes there.
Yep, for sure.
Of course, a big part of that, I mean, one of the biggest glaring omissions is Spider-Man. And that's kind of just, again, dumb stuff outside of the story world, just with Sony and legal issues. So, but maybe we'll see Defenders come back in season 2. Who knows?
That requires me to watch Defenders, and I don't want to. So like they're at that point they're digging the bottom of the barrel for the Defenders fans, and that's desperation.
The thing is, I feel like there's fans of the characters.
Yeah.
I don't think there's fans of the show though.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think they could maybe make something where the fans like. So who knows?
All right. Well, we'll have rants here and there moving forward, and we can talk about it in the Discord because we're very active on there. I've been proud of our community there, chatting up a storm, sharing things that we find. It's been fun. It's been real, but watching Daredevil was not real fun. We're going to see how this double feature, still back to weekly episode, works. Let us know in the Discord or the comments of this episode if you like it. We have merch still. I want to order new stuff, because I only have a few things. Also ordered
Patreon
Ninjas
podcast.
merch because I've been having fun listening to Ninjas. And listen to our Ninjas episode because they were a lot of fun to have on. We have a fun episode next week, or, what will be next week.
Oh, wait, what we're saying now is going to be at the end of
Part 2.
the second part. Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
So next week's episode will be that. I was confused.
Share this with a friend, rate it 5 stars. Do that. And also, stickers are still available. I'm gonna be honest, nobody bought stickers, so there's $2 stickers. I might even drop the price just because it's not actually a loss for me right now. Get your OAFP sticker at the link in the description. Until next week, know that you're loved. God bless.
Thanks for watching, Mom.